Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make cake pops. Not just any old boring cake pops. Not that cake pops are boring. I'm going to be showing you how to make red velvet cake pops. Cake pops are like fantastic any time of the year. But since it's like Valentine's is right around the corner, I'm going to show you how to make red velvet cake pops. Perfect for this time of year. I love red velvet cake. It's like sentimental to me. It was like one of the layers on my wedding cake and I love red velvet. It's something about it. Don't really particularly like the red dye in it, but red velvet cake is always good, and we'll just ignore the fact that it has a ton of red dye. And I'm gonna show you how to make these. They're pretty easy to make, pretty basic. There's only like a few ingredients that you really need to make these. There is some like basic stuff that you'll need, like the cake pop stick. I do recommend that you buy some styrofoam. This is what styrofoam is. There's like different shapes. Mine is just circular. You can get like a rectangle. You get a bigger one, a smaller one. I got mine from Hobby Lobby. I'll make sure to leave my recipe down below so you guys can follow it step by step. But I'm gonna walk you through it step by step to make it as less confusing as I possibly can, because I feel like cake pops really overwhelm people, and they're actually pretty easy to make. They're fun to eat, and besides all the labor and love that you pour out onto them, they're pretty delicious and quite basic. So if you guys like more basic recipes, make sure you're subscribed to my channel, leave me a comment, give me a like, hit that bell notification so you're notified every time I post videos. Maybe I'll post more cake pop videos, and let me show you how to make these delicious things, because they're just balls of fun on a stick. Yeah. Let's get to it. I find the easiest way to start making cake pops is by using just cake box mix. I'm using red velvet, and you can use any brand that you find at the grocery store. I just found this one at Walmart, and I'm actually just following the package instructions, and I'm using a 9x13 baking dish, so just adjust according to your package. And again, I'm just following exactly what the package says. If you have a homemade recipe of red velvet cake or whichever kind of cake that you want to make into cake pops, you can definitely use that. But I find that the packaged cake mix works really well, and it's super quick. So since I'm all about convenience, I'm using that. I'm also making my cake mix or the batter the night before, just because I find that it is easier to do so. So I make it at night, I pop it in the oven, bake it, and once it is completely baked, I pull it out of the oven, and then I allow it to come to room temperature so it cools off, and then I just refrigerate it overnight. I find that this really works well for me, just because I don't have to wait around all day for my cake mix to completely cool. I just know that the next day it is cooled, and I could get making the cake pops straight away without worrying that the cake hasn't cooled off enough. But do whatever works for you. So this is kind of what it looks like once it's done baking. I just wrapped it in plastic wrap and refrigerated it. Then the next morning I took the plastic wrap off. I like to cut the edges just so I don't get any hard bits in my cake pop. Cake pops are supposed to have like a really mushy, smooth texture, and the edges tend to get a little bit hard, a little bit burnt. So just cut around them and then pull the cake mix out with clean hands and start crumbling it into a large bowl. Make sure you're using a really large bowl and just crumble it slightly with your hands. I get questions if you can use a blender. I've never tried using a blender for any of this, but you can try and let me know if it works. I'm just kind of old-fashioned. I like to use my hands in the kitchen. And yes, I am wearing my wedding ring. I am married, so I don't want to hear any comments about using my ring. If you don't like it, don't watch the video. What can I say? And besides all that, it's just my husband and I eating these cake pops. He's not grossed out by my wedding ring. I'm not grossed out by my wedding ring, so there is just no need for nasty comments now. Let's keep them positive. And then yeah, I'm just playing with those crumbs because they're kind of fun to play with, and my hands are super red. But if you feel grossed out by all of this, try to use a blender, try to use gloves. I don't know what to tell you. Then I'm adding some frosting. I'm just using the store-bought kind, but I got comments that you can use like cream cheese, like spreadable cream cheese. That sounds really good. I wish I would have done that, because then you could use like the rest of the cream cheese on like bagels and stuff like that. But again, I'm just using the cream cheese frosting from the store, and I'm again using my lovely hands that the Lord gave me to make these cake pops and mix them all up. And once they form into a ball, that is a good sign. Also, use only 2 to 3 tablespoons of frosting into your cake mix. Don't add any extra, because you're going to risk messing up your cake pops. And then you want to line a cookie sheet with parchment paper and grab a ice cream scoop or a cookie scoop, whatever you want to call them. The scoop should be no bigger than 1.5 tablespoons. Make sure you get the right size, because if you make your cake pops too big, they won't stay on the stick. Then I want you to slowly grab this cake mixture and scoop it into your scoop, and then press it against your palms. Make sure you kind of like squeeze all the air, all the creases out, and then roll it between your palms. I'm kind of showing you guys how to do this a lot of times just because I want you guys to get this right. I don't want anyone to mess up or their cake balls to fall off the cake pops, because that would totally defeat the purpose. So they should be lovely and round. Try to get them as round as you can. They don't have to be like perfect. But one of the most important tips that I have for you is to make sure that once you scoop the cake batter out, like right here, make sure once you put them into your hands or into the palm of your hands, that you're like really pressing them and squeezing them. You do want them to have structure. So make sure they are like nicely squeezed into a tight ball before you start rolling them into a ball. Before you roll them into your palms, that's what I'm trying to say. Make sure you squeeze them and make sure everything is nicely compacted into a lovely ball. So I'm just going to fast forward the rest of them. I'm not using all of this mixture just because, like I said earlier, it is my husband and I, and we're not going to be needing to eat all this. Yeah, it's a lot of cake pops and it's a lot of red dye, which makes me slightly nervous, but hey, you know, red velvet is delicious. So once you roll them all out, I went ahead and started melting my white candy melts. I bought my candy melts from Walmart, but you can get them from Hobby Lobby. And I think if you can't get your hands on these candy melts, you could buy almond bark from the store and melt that down. I think it gives you the same effect. I've never personally tried it, but someone did mention that it does work. So you're not paying for like the Wilton name brand candy melts. Try the almond bark. And I'm also using a double boiler method to melt my candy melts. If you have a microwave, just go ahead and melt these in 30-second intervals in the microwave and stir in between each one. But I don't own a microwave and it's perfectly fine, believe it or not. I've survived in the 21st century. So just use a double boiler if you're like me. If not, use a microwave. Just do what you gotta do to get these candy melts melted. Also make sure that your water isn't touching the bottom of your glass bowl if you're using this method, because you can burn your candy melts, so don't do that. And once everything is nicely melted and combined, you want to carefully take it off the heat. If you are using almond bark, make sure you are chopping it up before you melt it into manageable pieces so it melts faster. Next, I'm just dipping my cake pop sticks into my melted chocolate, and I'm not going all the way through into my balls. I'm kind of just going, I would say probably like halfway through. And when you are dipping your cake sticks into the candy melt, I'm not dipping it a lot. As you can see, it kind of looks like a Q-tip. And then I went ahead and I did this to all of my cake balls. Make sure you're using cake pop sticks because these work really well and they hold the cake balls up really nicely. Make sure you're not skipping the step of dipping the cake pop sticks into the melted chocolate before you put them into the cake balls. I know it seems like common sense, but believe it or not, some people do forget or they miss this step. So I'm gently reminding you guys to not forget it. Once you're finished adding your cake pop sticks to your cake balls, make sure you place these into the freezer for 20 minutes, no longer than 20 minutes, because you do not want the candy coating on the outside to crack. I'll try to get into that in a little bit later. So as I went to put my cake pops in the freezer, they kind of fell over. No worries, I fixed them. It was a little bit of a fail, but my next fail is even worse than all of this. So while I waited for my cake pops to hang out in the freezer, I went ahead and started to try to dye these sprinkles. I couldn't find red sprinkles at Walmart, so I was like, well, I'll just do my own. But they didn't work out at all, so don't try this at home because it was like a complete failure. I even tried to get them to dry on parchment paper. Yeah, it didn't work. So when you have a few more minutes left on your cake pops to hang out in the freezer, start melting your candy melt coating that will go on the outside of these cake pops. I'm just melting the rest of my white chocolate cake melts, candy melts, whatever you want to call it, in a double boiler method. Again, you could use the microwave for this. Just make sure you're stirring in between each interval. I'm using the double boiler. It just works for me. Also, I went ahead and added some coconut oil when this was all melted. For some reason, I don't have that on camera. And then once I melted my white candy melts, I went ahead and also melted my red candy melts. I wasn't sure if I was going to use my red candy melts because I thought it was like too much red, but I'm glad that I picked these up and I just went ahead and melted these also. So it's super easy to melt candy melts over a double boiler setting, and it's actually not that hard living without a microwave. You just kind of find creative methods around it. So I melted my red candy melts exactly the same way I melted my white candy melts, and once they were melted, I went ahead and added coconut oil to my candy melts. You don't have to use coconut oil. You can use any type of flavorless oil that you want. You're probably thinking coconut oil has a flavor. I actually don't mind the coconut flavor, but use whatever flavorless oil you have. The oil helps the candy melts stay melted for a lot longer, so you're not constantly reheating the candy melts when you are dipping the cake pops, just because that gets really old fast. And again, we are just starting like the really tedious steps. So pull out those cake pops out of the freezer. Make sure they weren't in there longer than 20 minutes. If they were, you might want them to rest a little bit, probably for like 5-10 minutes before you start this step. Here I just poured my white candy melts into a glass cylinder. You don't have to do this. I actually would recommend that you just keep it in the bowl. It's actually a lot easier, a little secret. And then all I'm doing is dipping my cake pops extremely slowly into that candy melt, and then I'm tapping and twirling, swirling, however you want to say it, the extra candy melt off. Now I'm using my wrist. You can use your finger to tap off any extra candy melt. Make sure you're not using the rim of the glass cup or the glass bowl, whatever you're using, to tap off the extra chocolate melt or candy melt from these cake pops. They should look something like this. The reason you don't want to do that is because if you do tap them on the hard glass, you can pop the balls right off of the cake sticks. So be extremely gentle, be extremely delicate while you do this. Take your time, do not rush it. I felt like the white candy melts were a little bit difficult just because the red velvet kind of shows through the white. So that's just a little FYI if you wanted to dip yours in white candy melts. Also, the reason that I don't want you guys to freeze your cake pops for longer than 20 minutes is because if you pull them straight away out of the freezer after they've been in there for like hours or like 30 minutes or whatever, the cake pops tend to freeze. And then when you go to dip them in the hot chocolate melt, candy melts, those like tend to crack, and you don't want that. You want them to just solidify in the freezer just a little bit. You want the bottom of the sticks, the part that you dipped into the candy melt, to harden just enough. So don't leave them in the freezer for longer than 20 minutes. That is like one of the biggest tips, because if you do, the candy melts on the outside will crack and they just don't look as pretty. So make sure you do not forget that, because that wouldn't be good. So I'm just going ahead, working really slowly to get my cake pops coated. Then I went ahead and tried to use some of these red sprinkles that I made. They were like a complete fail just because they were getting all over my finger. They weren't spreading evenly, but I did do a few in the red sprinkles. After seeing that my makeshift red sprinkles weren't working out really well, I went ahead and dipped some more in the white candy coating, and then I tried to drizzle some of the red candy coating onto the white. I made sure that the candy coating, the white one, was completely hardened, and I was just using a rubber spatula going back and forth trying to get a drizzle on it. They turned out okay. They weren't like horrible. And then I went ahead, dipped another one. I'm really taking my time as I dip each cake pop into the candy melt, and then I'm really taking my time as I'm twirling them and tapping any extra candy melts off. You want to make sure you get as much as you can of the candy coating off of the cake balls or the cake pops, because you don't want to bite into like a big old cake pop that has a bunch of coating. That wouldn't be good, and I don't think the cake pops will stay on the stick if the coating is too much on the outside. So make sure you're taking your time. I know it gets like super tedious and annoying and frustrating, but it's a labor of love and they're super good. So now I'm using a fork to drizzle some of that red candy melt onto the white. This turned out okay too. I didn't really care for it. Then with the next cake pop, I decided to dip the whole thing in the red candy melt, and now I'm just showing you that you can do it out of the bowl. You do not need it to be in the glass cup, but just do whatever is easier for you. If you do this and you have like two colors, make sure you are covering the other color and make sure the color that you dip the stick in is lighter than the other one. And then I went ahead and did the same thing. I swirled and tapped the extra candy melt off. I'm using my wrist, but you can also use your fingers. You're just gonna get tired either way, whatever you do. So just tap off the extra, and then I went ahead and swirled or drizzled some of that white candy melt on top of it using a spoon. And I really like the way this came out. I thought it was a lot prettier. Make sure you're adding all of your cake pops onto a styrofoam thing because you don't want them to touch each other and you do want them to stand up. So once you are placing them onto the styrofoam, make sure they're completely spread out. So just keep dipping all your cake pops until you're almost done and get as creative as you can with these things. I'm using my finger right now because my wrist was kind of tired and tapping the extra off of the cake pop. And then once that was done, I decided that I was going to use some white sprinkles that I had left over from my Starbucks cake pops. And I really like the way this turned out because it really stood out against the red. If you notice that your candy melt is hardening, make sure you reheat them according to what you need. So I had 3 more cake pops to go, and this is where I made like a happy mistake. I didn't mean to do this. It was like a complete accident. So on the last of the 3 cake pops, I went ahead and dipped this one into the white candy melt, and then I started twirling it as per usual. And again, I was like tired, annoyed, frustrated, and I was pretty much done with making cake pops. I was losing my patience because this takes a lot of time. So as I was twirling it and trying to get all the extra candy melt off of it, I was like thinking, what should I do? So I decided that I was going to drizzle it with some of the red candy melt. And instead of waiting for the candy melt, the white one, to completely harden, for some reason, I didn't wait because I was impatient, and I started drizzling it with the red candy melt. And mind you, these were really watery, both of them. None of them had hardened up. And I noticed that it was kind of like drizzling and like melting off the cake pop. So I was like thinking, what am I gonna do? So I just started gently twirling it in my hands. And as I was twirling it, I'm like thinking, it turned into this beautiful mess, which is like a marbled effect, a marbled look. And I really love how it came out. So I decided to try that with a red base and a white drizzle. And I didn't really particularly like the way this came out with the red base, but I did the same thing. I just covered it in the red candy coating, and then I tapped off the extra using my hands, my fingers. And as I was doing that, I went ahead and drizzled some of the white candy melt on top of that, and I just gave it like a gentle twirl. I didn't really like this because I felt like the red was kind of coming through on the white. So as you can see, you just have to like gently twirl it, not all that much, and your fingers do kind of get a little messy and you're like constantly washing your hands. So you're just tapping and twirling it, and before you know it, you have like this beautiful marbled looking cake pop, which looks so beautiful in my opinion. And I love the way these came out. I think this one kind of looks a little bit Christmassy, kind of like animal print by accident. And yeah, that's what this one looks like. As you can see, the red is like peeping through the white. Not my favorite, but it's still really pretty. And then I went ahead and I did the same thing to the last one. So I dipped it in the white, and then I drizzled the red on top of it straight away without letting it harden. I wish I would have drizzled it like in different directions instead of going one direction, but since I didn't know what I was doing and I just made this happy mistake, I just came up with this, and I think they came out really nicely. So experiment, let your creative juices flow. I'm sure you guys are going to be super creative. If you ever want to show me your creativeness, tag me on Instagram. I'd love to see what you guys make. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I know I talked a lot, but I'm trying to explain everything, trying to get every last detail to you guys that I know. I'm trying to give you as many tips as I can to help you guys make the best cake pops ever. So I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial. Thanks for taking your time to watch it, and I hope it really helps you guys out. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Check out my outro because my cake pops I think came out pretty awesome. If you're wondering why I'm a little nervous about the red food dye, it's because I actually have family members that are allergic to the red dye, and if they have just like a little tiny bit of red dye, they kind of have like seizures, and it's kind of scary. So that's just my 2 cents. It smells like a candy factory in here. So if you guys want to go to a candy factory, but you don't want to, you want your house to smell like one, make these. They're so good. Your kitchen will smell so awesome and like a candy factory. I don't have any other words, just a candy factory in your house.
Like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
Yes, yes.
In your house?
Yes. So if you want Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in your house, just make these at home. Your house will smell sweet, will smell like a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and you don't even have to go to a Wonderland. You just
you
do
don't
it in
need
your...
to win that golden ticket.
Yes! You just make it at home, and you're set. Yeah. Despite all the steps and all the hard work that was poured into these cake pops, I think they turned out really good. I really like how each and every single one of them are different. I was experimenting with them because I love to experiment, especially when I'm filming. It's like all your creative juices start flowing. So this one is one of my favorites because I accidentally messed up and I dipped it in the white chocolate and then I dripped the red on top of it, and then it was kind of like meshing into each other. So I kind of twirled it, and it became like a marble effect. And I really like how it came out. I think this one's my favorite. I couldn't find the red sparkles or sprinkles at Walmart, but if you find them, use those for the white ones. I think they'll look really pretty. Make this recipe your own. You do not have to decorate them like I did. If you just prefer like a white coating, that would be really pretty. You could get really creative. You can make them really simple. You can mess up on a few. No one's gonna judge you. Do what you like in your kitchen. Babe, which one was your favorite?
Out of the white and the red?
Uh-huh.
I don't even know if I tried the red one.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, which red one do you want? Do you want a marbled one? Do you want one with like a drizzle?
Give me the marbled one.
Did you like the marbled ones too? They kind of look Christmassy, like a peppermint stick. Here you go.
Okay. I like the red one better.
Really? It has a different flavor?
Yeah.
Really? They're supposed to taste the same.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they are.
One's red and one's...
That's just the
white.
color. They're supposed to taste like vanilla, the chocolate melt.
I don't know.
I think it's the food coloring getting to you.
No, it's just different.
No way. Okay, you know what? Let me give you a white one. Okay, not a sprinkled one, but I want this one.
Okay.
But I'll give you the next one. See, I wish I would have made more. They look so cool. And I wish I would have dripped them on like opposite too. They would have turned out so cool. They taste the same. Come on. One has food dye and one doesn't.
Just to show you that I bit both of them.
You did. Oh, and they're so pretty.
Okay, they taste the same.
Oh, I knew it. I knew it, guys. All right, I hope you guys make these cake pops. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial on how to make cake pops, red velvet cake pops. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit and now you're not intimidated to make cake pops. Make sure to check out my other cake pop video, my Starbucks cake pop video. I made like a replica of the Starbucks birthday cake pop. It's kind of hard to say, but I'll link it up here so you guys can watch it. Make sure you're also subscribed to my channel and check out my other videos. Show me some love. Make sure you're subscribed. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye. So good.